As a massive fan of the original John Wick, I was understandably hugely anticipating John Wick 2. And there's always a danger, of course, with a sequel that it doesn't really live up not to the technical aspect of the original, but more to that magic spark which a great movie can sometimes have. And that was something which initially I actually had to wait after seeing John Wick 2 to decide if I believe it had or not. When I first saw the film, I liked it a lot, but I didn't feel that magic spark that the first film had. But when I see a movie, I generally have to wait a couple of days at least to really know how I truly feel about the film. It gives me time to think it over, think of things that I did like or didn't like, and also, especially for a sequel, how it compares to the original. Now, for this particular film, I watched it a few days ago, and I loved it at the time, but I wasn't sure if I loved it more, less, or the same as the original. There were certain things that I recognised instantly about John Wick 2, and those were more technical things. For instance, it's a much bigger film than the first one. The story itself is still fairly simple, but it's the world that feels much larger. There are more characters at play, there's more violence, there's more death, there are bigger set pieces. From a technical standpoint, it is definitely a bigger, more flashy film than the first one, but in the best way possible. Because, of course, the action in the first movie dominates the film. It's very much so an action film, of course, and the story is simple to allow that action to take place. In this second film, the story doesn't really get that much more complex, and one of the things that I was worried about going into the second film is the justification of why John Wick is still doing his John Wick thing, because the whole point of the first film was that he was trying not to be that guy anymore. So why in the second film is he still doing it? And this isn't really a spoiler, but there is a good reason for that, and you learn about it within, say, the first couple of minutes in this film. And that reason totally put me at ease, and that is, it takes place immediately after the first film. And as I said, that's not a spoiler, it's literally the opening of the film. And that makes so much sense. The fact that the film takes place virtually in the same time frame leading on from the first film really allows you to get immediately immersed into this sequel, and actually I believe would make it perfect for watching the two films back to back, because it really would feel like you're just going immediately into the next film. And that's something which I really like from series or franchise based movies, when you can really feel that yes, this is one long story. And in particular, one of the things that I really enjoyed about John Wick 2, in fact, in a similar vein, I would say, to the first film in this regard, is that it manages to have a number of different characters who are all interesting and have very deep, long-standing, implied backstories. But it manages to have those characters without them overshadowing John Wick, and in this second film you get to see even more of that. There are some fantastic new characters in larger and smaller roles, some who you don't even know the name of, they just appear here and there, others who are much more central to the plot, and I love them all. Now, some definitely more than others, and my personal favourite new character by far of John Wick 2 was Common, the rapper. He's not called that in the film, of course, but Lonnie Rashid Lynn Jr. He is an awesome addition to this John Wick world, and he was my favourite character of this second film by far. Of course, John Wick notwithstanding, for obvious reasons. Now, overall, the story is, without spoiling anything, fairly similar to the first one, and funnily enough, I actually predicted the opening of this film after watching the first one when it came out, and I was pretty happy to see that what I had said in jest actually turned out to be true. It's not overly complex an idea. When you see the film you'll know what I mean, but it is the obvious next step in the John Wick story leading from the events of the first one. But going beyond that, there is more world building at play in this second film, and according to the directors, that was a very deliberate thing. And I think the universe of John Wick, not just this movie, but also retroactively affecting the first one, really benefits from that. It makes the film feel much bigger in scope than a film of its relative budget and success would usually feel like. Usually stories like this are very self-contained, and although the story is self-contained, through nuance and innuendo, the world is hinted at being so much bigger, and that really works for these films so well, and I'm really looking forward to the proposed third film to come later as well. I'm a massive fan of the John Wick franchise. I love, to be honest, any movie like this. I would categorise it as similar to, of course, the Bourne movies, the Equalizer film and films to come, and also The Accountant, which was my favourite film of last year. I love that kind of smaller scope movie about a very skilled character trying to get out of a compromising situation for whatever reasons, or coming out of retirement for whatever reasons. It's a similar trope, but for movies like this, it works really well. Now, stuff that I didn't like, well, to be honest, I don't think there was anything. There was nothing in this movie which affected the first one negatively. It didn't undermine anything. It worked very cohesively, and it only made it better. Now, I would say that because John Wick 1 has been out for so long, and I've had the chance to rewatch it more, I do have more of a connection to that first film. Understandably, I think most people will. But I will say that from a technical point of view, this second movie is definitely better in every way. And I think that over time I will probably come to love this film, especially with rewatchings, at least as much as the first one, because it's different enough to the first one to justify its existence, and also adds enough to the world and to the story and to the characters to really make it feel like it was a worthwhile sequel. And that was a really nice thing to see, because fantastic films aren't always followed up by fantastic sequels, and this one really is, I would say. Now, that brings us, of course, to our individual categories of review. If you're new to the channel, we have 5 of them. First of all, we have the story and the plot, and for the story and plot of John Wick, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, and that probably doesn't sound that great, but the reason why is because I give basically every movie an opening gambit of 5 points. 5 is just what the film needs to do. If it drops below a 5, then that's a negative for me. If it goes above a 5, then of course that's better and better. I would give this a 6 because it is a very simple story, and as such it just wouldn't be fair to cleverer and more complex films to rate it even higher. But it was definitely above par. It was a good use of a simple story. What about the characters, though? Well, I've already gushed about them. I love the new characters, I love the performances, the casting was pretty much perfect, I have to say. And so overall, I'm going to give the characters and their motivations an 8 out of 10. Now, considering what I said, that may not sound as impressive. You probably expect a 10 out of 10. But the fact that we don't see as much of the backstory of some of the characters, and also the performances are not one note, but they're very specifically geared towards action. And again, I just don't feel it would be fair to films with incredible character performances or acting pieces to rate this one a perfect 10. That being said, I love the characters in it. As I said, I love the casting, so it's an 8 from me. As far as the visuals, the special effects, the stunt work, etc., I'm going to give the film a 10. Because the practical effects are fantastic, the fight scenes, the choreography in particular, even with Keanu himself, are fantastic. It's some of the best action you will ever see. And that's even when you put it up against the first film. There is so much more large scale, but also, interestingly, more one-on-one hand-based fighting. And I love that. It was a great showcase of choreography, and they did it perfectly in this film. So overall, it's definitely an easy 10 for me. As far as the audio, the soundtrack, the music of the film in general, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, because I love the music in the first John Wick with the Marilyn Manson soundtrack. In John Wick 2, I didn't personally find that the soundtrack popped out as much. It became more of a theme tune based on some of the music from the first film, but at the same time, I like that, because the first film was this new, fresh idea, and nobody would really recognise a theme tune because it just isn't an established thing. Whereas now that John Wick is a known property, you can start to develop stuff like a signature beat or a signature soundtrack. And I feel that this film had more of that. The sound effects also come under this category for me, and the reason why, again, it's getting an 8 out of 10 is because in particular the gunshots, the sound effects used there in the film are very loud. And although that may be annoying to some people, I found it to be perfect, because that's the way guns are. They're loud. They should not be dumbed down in a film. Now, that being said, there is a cliche used at one part in the film where they use silencers on weapons, and nobody in the surrounding area can hear them. That's just not how guns work. They're not called silencers for a start, they're called suppressors, and they don't make guns silent. So of course you've got some tropes in there, but it doesn't kill the film at all. Overall, as I said, it's an 8 from me in that regard. And finally, for the rewatchability and entertainment factor of the film, which obviously is the most subjective of the 5 categories for me, I'm going to have to give John Wick 2 a 10 out of 10. Because it took everything that was brilliant, perfect even, about the first film, and as cliched as the saying is, it really did turn it up to 11. So for me, 10 out of 10 is an easy mark to give this film. It's very rewatchable, superbly entertaining, it's a great party watch, it's a great watch to watch over by yourself, or just with 1 or 2 people. It's perfect for every occasion, basically. And that means that overall, as a combined score based on our 5 individual categories put together, I'm giving John Wick 2 a very well-earned 4.2 out of 5. And if you're new to the channel, that is a very good score. Relatively few films that I review go above a 4. None go above a 4.5 so far. So to say that this is a 4.2 is high praise, at least from me. So overall, if you're a fan of the first film, of course you should definitely check this out, and you'll love it. There's really nothing not to love. And overall, that's it for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.